call this Finance and Budget meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Romano adopts the agenda.
Moved by Romano, supported by Carabelli, I believe. Please vote.
That motion passes 10-0.
Okay, thank you. Public participation. Does anyone wish to be heard? And let's see. Anyone wish to be heard? I don't see anybody in chat. One more time, anyone wish to be heard? With that, we'll close public participation. Presentations, comprehensive annual finance report for the year ending December 31, 2019. So I'll just hand it over to Lisa, I think. That's what I'll do here.
Okay, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. We are very pleased once again to be here to present the results of the audit of the 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Again, my name is Lisa Plonka. I'm the lead audit partner for the county's audit and a governmental partner with Planta Moran. With me here today are a couple of, I think, should be familiar faces. Ali Hijazi, who is the senior audit manager, and Dan Hart, who is also a manager on the engagement. So in a minute, I'll hand it over to them and they'll walk through our presentation of the results of the audit. Obviously, this year was an unusual year just in terms of kind of how the audit wrapped up. While we did do our field work as according to our typical procedures in the fall, a lot of our interim and planning procedures, we were forced because of COVID-19 to perform the bulk of the audit procedures in April and May in a remote environment. And I guess I would say despite that, we were able to complete the audit according to the plan, scope, and timing as we would have expected. I think we may have even dated the opinion letter a couple of days sooner. So we certainly very much appreciate the coordinated effort and all of kind of the change in plans and how well everyone adapted quickly by Steve Schmiegel, Steve Adair, and their entire teams. So I think all in all, despite the challenges, the audit process itself went remarkably close to plan. 2019, our audit of the federal programs is still in progress at this point. Typically, that would be due to the state on September 30th, but again, in light of everything that's going on, that has been extended to December 31st. So we're still in process with that piece of the audit. But the audit of the CAFR itself, just to give a quick overview, once again, this year we have what's referred to as an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion on the financial statements, meaning everything contained within the CAFR is in accordance with all applicable governmental accounting standards, and all of the numbers have been through our pretty exhaustive audit process. So again, clean opinion, which is what you would expect to see on the financial statement each year. So with that, I will hand it over to Dan to go through the overview of the results of the audit, some of our observations on internal control and other matters, and then also we have some slides that are a brief overview on financial trends. Dan?
Great, thanks Lisa. Happy to be here today. Just want to make sure, can everybody see the slides that I'm sharing? Okay, great.
Yes, Dan.
All right, so first off, as part of the audit, we produce 3 primary deliverables. As Lisa mentioned, the independent auditor's report that's within the CAFR, And that effectively summarizes our opinion, which again was an unmodified or clean opinion, and that's the highest opinion that you can have under auditing standards. The next two deliverables are the independent auditor's report to the audit committee, which really just summarizes our responsibilities under auditing standards, how the audit was conducted, and any significant changes that happened during this year. And really, we'll get into that in the following slides. And then finally, again, we'll touch base on later in this presentation will just be our report on internal controls. All right. So first, as we go through the planning process for every audit, as we identify risks of misstatement. These risks should be familiar from the pre-audit letter that we would have previously sent to the board. And so we want to take this time just to circle back and let you know the procedures that were performed. So related to cash and investments, our testing included testing reconciling items on bank recs, and also obtaining third-party confirmations or other source information like audited financial statements to ensure both proper valuation and completeness of your cash and investments. Related to the different year ends that are presented, we focused on testing the interfund and inter-entity reconciliations provided by management to ensure that all information and transactions were captured appropriately in the CAFR that you see today. Next, related to community mental health, we focused on reviewing the recognition of revenue and expenses along with balance sheet reconciliations to ensure compliance with GAAP across material transactions. And finally, there were two new accounting standards that were implemented during the year. As you'll see in a separate footnote within the CAFR, that would have been GASB 83 for asset retirement obligations, as well as GASB 84 for fiduciary activities. For these standards, again, we reviewed management's analysis and the related journal entries to implement the standards, as well as the impact of the initial recognition and classification changes, again, which are described in the CAFR footnotes. All right. Next here, so kind of the results of the audit. Again, the opinion, like we mentioned before, was unmodified. And for the opinion, that is based on us obtaining sufficient audit evidence for the different classes of transactions within the CAFR. So we, during the audit, when we plan and perform our audit procedures, we're looking to obtain a reasonable but not an absolute level of assurance to ensure that the financials are materially correct. We also do consider internal controls as part of the planning process and designing our audit procedures. However, you will not see an opinion or assurance on internal controls. Again, like Lisa mentioned, the audit was conducted in a similar time frame despite the unique situations this year for fieldwork. So that started in October 2019 with some of the 930 funds and then ended prior to June 30. And again, like I mentioned before, the new accounting standards that were implemented this year were GASB 83, GASB 84, and GASB 88, which related to debt disclosures only. Next here, again, continuing the results of the audit for significant accounting estimates. This continues to be for the county, the valuation of the net pension asset and OPEB liability, any reserves for ongoing litigation and claims that could result of that, and also valuation of alternative investments primarily in the pension and OPEB plans. We're happy to report no difficulties or disagreements with management during the audit. Again, Steve Smeagol and Steve Adair and the entire team were great to work with as usual this year. And then finally, as far as other additional information, you'll see in section 2 of our letter to the audit committee, there is a summary of upcoming new accounting standards that will impact the county. And you'll notice that there was a delay by either 1 year or more on upcoming accounting standards. and that was related to the issuance of GASB 95 in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then there's also other topics that may be of interest to the county and certain other legislative matters that we just wanted to bring to your attention as you assess a potential impact on the county. And with that, I will pass it over to Ali.
Thanks, Dan. So as Lisa mentioned, one of the items that we do report on each year are matters of internal control. While we don't issue a formal opinion on the effectiveness of internal control, if we do identify internal control deficiencies that we deem merit your attention, we are required to report those. We have two instances of internal control deficiencies that we identified as part of our audit. One that we consider to be a material weakness in internal controls, the second which we deem to be a significant deficiency. The first item relates to some non-GAAP accounting at the Department of Public Works. Essentially what that means is we had a couple of journal entries that we identified that were required to be posted to the books and records of the Department of Public Works to properly state their financial statements. Essentially, the nature of these items was to reflect proper timing for recognition of grant or special assessment revenue. So there are particular requirements in the accounting rules for when those revenues get recognized. And there were one situation where the revenue was recorded a little too early, a second situation where the revenue was recorded a little too late. So both journal entries kind of offset one another, but because those were adjustments that were identified as part of our audit procedures, we did deem it to be an internal control issue that rose to the level of a material weakness. The second item relates to testing that we performed related to compliance with the Enrolled Ordinance 2017-03 or the purchasing ordinance. We did perform tests of certain transactions and noted that in some cases, the documentation supporting compliance with all aspects of the purchasing ordinance were not available, or in situations where there was an interpretation that certain transactions met one of the exceptions to the requirements of the purchasing ordinance, the rationale for how those exceptions applied was not documented. And so the internal control recommendation here essentially is that formal documentation is retained, documenting those decision points when they're being applied. Okay. So moving on, the next set of slides we have really focus on more financial trends.
Veronica, can I ask a question of Ali?
Sure, go ahead. But before you do, let me get a motion to receive and file. I think there's going to be a couple of questions on the material weakness and significant deficiency. But can I seek a motion to receive and file?
Carabelli, so moved.
Okay. Who supported? I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So there's a motion and support, and I think we're going to end up going back to that, Harold. So why don't we go ahead and get through the whole thing, and then I'll call on you first.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great. So this slide that you see here presents general fund revenue by category for each of the last 4 years. For the year ended 2019, 12/31/2019, the county reported a little under $238 million of general fund revenue. As expected, the majority of that is property tax driven, which increased year over year by about $6 million. The other categories of general fund revenue, by and large, are somewhat consistent or continue prior year trends. The next slide shows the general fund expenditures for the same 4-year period. For the year ended 12/31/2019, general fund expenditures were about $234 million versus a little under $231 million for the previous year. The largest categories of expense are public safety at just under $75 million, and interfund transfers, about $49 million for 2019. The only variance to note here is that health and welfare department expenditures were down from the prior year from about 23 million to about 18.9 million. So historically, each year we do like to present the history of transfers broken out between those transfers which are used for operating purposes versus those that are to fund capital projects. So for 2019, as I mentioned, there was about $49 million of total transfers. Approximately 10 million of that was for capital projects, and a little under $40 million were used for operating purposes. And then the net result, obviously, of your revenues and expenditures is general fund balance. What this slide presents for the last 10 years is a calculation of fund balance as a percent of expenditures. Fund balance, just to take a quick step back, fund balance does have various categories. So things such as non-spendable fund balance, which are things that are like prepaid expenses, or restricted fund balance, things that are like grant dollars that might be sitting in your fund balance. This slide uses fund balance excluding those two categories. So it's really the unassigned fund balance as well as fund balance that has been assigned by finance or committed by the Board of Commissioners for particular projects. And then we take a percentage of general fund expenditures, including transfers out. So based on that math, at the end of 2019, the fund balance was 24.4%, which is a modest increase from 2018 and somewhat in line with the level over the last 5 years. So that concludes our prepared remarks, but happy to take any questions on anything we've presented or any other matters related to the audit.
Okay, thank you. Let me start with Commissioner Ha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll go back to that one on the purchasing issue. I think it was your third slide, if I'm correct. And by the way, the fund balance that you showed correlates with almost the identical fund balance in 2015, reading your slide. So that's, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's definitely consistent. Where it says lack of documentation supporting compliance with all aspects of purchasing ordinance, what is a example of that?
Sure. So, for example, there was, like, for example, there might be a maintenance contract for a particular type of, software purchase. So that might be an expenditure that, management would take the position and say, well, there's really only one provider that can provide that we can enter into a contract with. And so their interpretation would be exempt from certain requirements of the procurement ordinance. So what we would look for is say, okay, well, where have you documented your rationale for those facts and circumstances? And that documentation really didn't exist. So that would be one example, but we identified a few of those types of situations in our sample.
Yeah, so these may be items where we aren't necessarily saying they were out of compliance or inappropriate. It was more having a clearer rationale for why they weren't subject to certain aspects of the policy is the observation there.
And who owns that issue from an audit standpoint? That
would be administration, correct?
Well, I didn't hear administration say that.
No.
That is, I was waiting to chime in. It's administration.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Chairman.
Okay, regarding the same thing, why did my screen just go blank?
Uh-oh.
It's your picture.
What just happened? All right, well, it's not up there anymore. But if you could go to the material weakness, just real quick on the effect, you've got the same date for it going up and going down, if I'm not mistaken. Can you go to that slide, or do you not have that?
Well, I'm still seeing the slide here, but are you just referring to the one comment?
Oh, I'm referring to the letter that
Oh,
goes
the
in.
letter. Yeah, I can, Dan, I have that up. I can share it if you'd like.
Okay, yep. Let me stop presenting it.
Yep, let me see if I can present this.
In the meantime, I'm going to try to pull this up on my phone because I don't have the agenda or anything anymore.
Okay.
Okay, under the effect, it says,
Yep.
so it was overstated in September 30, 2019, and it was understated September 30th, 2019.
Yes, so great question. So because they're two separate issues, so we are indicating the effect of.
It's going to have been the August 2019.
I'm sorry?
Should one of them have been the August 2019, or are they supposed to be the same date?
They are supposed to be the same date. So the first issue relates to certain grants and capital contributions where the department recognized revenue during the year ended September 30, 2019, when they really should be recognized in the year ended September 30, 2020. So that has the effect of overstating their 2019 revenue by $5.4 million. And then the second issue relates to special assessments, where the accounting adjustment there, or the accounting issue there, was that they recognized $4.3 million in 2020 when they should have recognized it in 2019. So to get the overall effect, you have to net those two amounts.
Okay, so if you do them together, you're subtracting one from the other?
Correct. So
And you're like $1 million off.
Correct. It's $1 million off. Exactly.
So what's up with, so what happens with that $1 million?
Well, the department posted those journal entries to correct the numbers. So the ones you see in your CAFR have been corrected.
Okay, and then going down to the significant deficiency.
Yep.
Steve, I have a question for you. Under the views from administration, it says the county management is in the process of improving review practices in order to better identify change orders, purchases, and contracts. I was in your office, and boy, I thought it was like 2 years ago that you were doing some things with your computer programs that I thought would enable you to flag change orders that put something over the threshold. What is the main issue for you with respect to that? Or is it a question of who's responsible? Because I look at the countywides, and we've got several of them, but everything runs through you. So I think you're sort of the focal point where it would be, where you would flag that. But that may be a matter of philosophy. So that's my question.
So the continuing problem we have is tracking the cumulative purchases. So once we are above a $35,000 threshold without reviewing reports as individual purchases come through, we may run into situations where we've exceeded the threshold and we don't know it because maybe a purchase comes in 6 months after the first purchase, sort of thing. If we're tracking purchase orders, we sort of have a similar situation, although Steve, Adair, and I get copies of all purchase orders or emails on them that exceed 35. Again, if we happen to remember that, that this now throws the cumulative purchase for the year over 35,000, that's a little difficult to keep track of.
Is that
Obviously-
because all of the payments to a specific vendor all go to the same place rather than separated out by project?
Not necessarily. It's just a matter of when the system is processing a new accounts payable transaction, it doesn't look back and see what the cumulative effect is of that new purchase. So there's nothing to flag somebody doing an input or creating an email or something like that. We have to run reports to try to keep track of this. So the ones that are over 35,000 are fairly easy. It's the cumulative ones where we have maybe smaller totals during the course of a year, and then oops, we exceed it.
Well, we've also had large projects that after they go a certain percentage over what we've approved should come back, and sometimes they're rather significant in nature.
Yeah, if those change orders are processed as a contract amendment, they got to run through our office here. If they're happen to be processed, and I'm not saying this happens, but if amendments are processed and not run through the contract review process, then it's difficult for our office to, track that kind of thing. We haven't yet implemented the contract management module in one solution. We're going through a major upgrade. We're hoping that we would start to be able to use that module. We found some difficulties in using it on an ongoing basis. So we continue to use the Smartsheet functionality in Google to track contracts under 35 and the civic clerk process, for contracts over 35. So the contract management module is not working out as I would hope to.
And it seems to me that county
Veronica, I think you've been muted.
I'm sorry. It seems to me a county of this size, it seems to me there would be programs out there. Your staff shouldn't be expected to try to flag all of that or just go on the word of county-wide elected officials who come and go and can be anybody from somebody who's been here 30 years to like somebody like Karen Springer who didn't last very long. Are there better programs out there? Are we missing something? Because it seems to me to be a significant burden with all that we do for that to be placed on your staff to just sort of flag.
I wouldn't disagree with you about the burden. You may be able to find more robust programs out there, but I guess it's a cost benefit trade-off. It would cost millions of dollars to change, like 5 or 6 million more probably. So it's a matter of, do we have the 5 or 6 million to spend? Is it worth it? Can we struggle through the way we're doing it? We could maybe try to invest some money with the vendor to kind of see what they could come up with. Maybe some customization. That would cost money as well. There are some very, very robust programs out there.
Right. I'm not trying to advocate for that. It's just I think we're going to continue to have this problem.
We could. We do our best. Some of these. Commissioner Hall had a question about some examples, and I think we had some examples where I think Ali referred to this where there were exceptions that were allowable. Say, for example, it's a professional service of some sort. But we may have had the board approve purchases, but it was a two-pronged test. Did the board approve a purchase? And then was the exception properly documented? So we may have had a purchase, but it didn't say sole source, or we didn't have a sole source letter or exception because of professional service. So we've now, I guess, being a little more diligent when Steve and I are reviewing items in Civic Clerk relative to requiring sole source letters, or at least documenting in the Civic Clerk sections, professional service, or something along those lines. So, that was,
Just to finish by saying, if our staff had read-only access to IPIS, we could aid you in that situation. So just wanted to point that out.
I'm gonna throw that out there.
Just thought I'd throw that out there. I don't see anyone else having questions. If there's anybody that does, please chime in and let me know, because I don't see any. So with that, we have a receive and file. Do any of you want to say any more to finish up with this?
Nope, just that we appreciate continuing to be the auditors for the county, and again, all the efforts of every department that we come in contact with, and in getting through an audit, especially under such unusual circumstances, was greatly appreciated. So thank you for your time, and we're open to questions at any point.
Chair Kleinfeld, can I make a comment, please?
Sure.
So Steve Adair is on the call, and I always make sure to make a special commendation for him. He coordinates the entire audit. I review items and final documents and address major questions, but Steve is the one that works day to day with the auditors through the 2.5 months that we are under audit, more than 2.5 months when you count the work that the auditors do in the fall for roads and other September 30 year-end funds. So I just always want to make sure that I put a shout out to Steve, because it's a long, dragged out process. Having done it for many years, I know what it is. It's far more complex, even in the last 3 or 4 years, due to the number of professional pronouncements that keep coming out of the GASB. So anyway, just a special thanks to Steve for all the hard work he does on this.
Okay, thank you. And I see Chair Smith would like to speak.
Thank you, Chair Kleinfeld. This more is, I think, for the auditors. I think this is the second year in a row we've flagged something like this, and I'm just wondering how many times. I mean, what's the process on this? I mean, what if next year and the year after and the year after we still haven't figured this out yet? What is your process for something like this? I mean, what's your next recommendation? How long does it go when you flag the same thing before something goes from bad to worse, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so I think that, our responsibility each year is to report on the issues, and we can't, there are only so many things that we have to force it, so we can elevate it and say this is the most severe type of deficiency, which would be a material weakness, but we can't force change. So like, just to give you an example, in some cases we might identify an internal control issue in a smaller community or something where they say, we're just going to be willing to live with that deficiency because we think what it would take to correct it is something that we don't want to undertake. So in those situations, it's just a repeat deficiency every year. So that is a possible outcome. We really don't have anything else, unfortunately, that we can do to kind of force a correction.
That's fine. So realistically, it's up to us as the board and the executive's office to try to get together and try to remedy this. I would
correct.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kraft. Does Commissioner Kraft want to speak? I have his name.
Can everybody hear me?
Okay, now we can hear you.
You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I just wanted to make the comment that I'm happy to see that community mental health has dropped off of the report. It has been on there for numerous years, as we know. And I just want to give hats off to our CEO, Dave Pankatai. And we also had an audit report last night for our contracting through the PIHP, and we made it through with flying colors. So I just wanted to say that, because it's been multiple years that I've been on the board and there have been issues that have popped up, and just wanted to point that out. So thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other speakers, so we've got a motion and support. So please vote.
That motion passes 13-0.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have the finance. Oh, by the way, thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Next, we have the Finance Department 2020 second quarterly report. And
Yeah, as I normally do, I make, just a few comments. We're willing to take any questions that you may have. Of course, you can imagine that the first 2 quarters of the year, particularly the second quarter, were a little bit different this year, obviously because of COVID, but
Steve, before you speak, let me get the motion in support to give Adriana time to get it into the system. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. I need a motion to
no problem.
and file.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Moved by Carabelli, supported by Ha. Okay, I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
So, normally I don't make very many comments about individual quarterly reports. This year is different, obviously, with the COVID, and I updated the board, I think it was 2 months ago, about where we thought we were headed through the end of the year. And I think I'd like to focus my comments on that. Of course, willing to take any questions you might have about the report itself. But 2 months ago, I informed the board that we thought that we'd be about $10 million under budget in revenues this year as a result of the pandemic, primarily in fee-based revenues like court fees and licenses for revenues and soil erosion permits, certificate, copies, you name it, court costs, that kind of thing. And I also indicated at the time that we were performing favorably on the expense side of the ledger to a point that I felt that we would be able to weather the storm for 2020. That continues to be the case. And in fact, the revenue side of the ledger looks a little bit better now than it did then, primarily as I see it today, as a result of liquor tax collections and personal property tax reimbursements from the state. So I'm saying now that it appears to us that revenues will be about 6 million under budget as opposed to 10 million. The fee-based revenues continue to suffer, as I was indicating 2 months ago, but liquor tax collections appear to be up. We received 2 of our 3 distributions, and we're already about 90% of budget. So I expect that line item to be over budget. I don't know exactly how much, but it'll be over budget. And if we get our essential services tax distribution from the state of 4 million that we normally get every year, which we won't know until November, we'll be, if that happens, we will be about $3.8 million over budget in that line item because we received a 2.8 million, I'm sorry. We received a $3.8 million distribution of surplus monies from 2019 in May of this year. So revenue side looks better than it did a couple of months ago. Obviously, we continue to monitor that very closely every month. The expense side of the house, we still continue to save money on overtime, salaries from holding positions vacant, and the like. Utilities, because of a remote work force now, or mostly remote, and those sorts of things. So that's kind of where I'm focusing, is where we're continuing to head through the pandemic as we, draw closer and closer to year end. So that concludes my comments on kind of our financial situation.
Thank you, which is good news because we don't know what next year's going to bring. And we don't know federal government wise if next year's going to do anything. A lot of the small counties haven't gotten the help that we have gotten, So
Correct.
Thank you. Commissioner Gillette.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, I caught what you were saying about the revenue side and where we stand on the revenue side of the ledger. I may have missed what you said about the expenditure side. I know you said that we are saving some money on utilities and overtime and other things, but is there a dollar amount or a percentage amount that we are compared to where we expected to be with regard to expenditures?
If we stay on the same trajectory or similar trajectory as we are through the end of July, I would suggest to you that we're going to come in under budget about 3% on the expense side. So.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Our expenses are 250 million or so.
Thank you. And I don't see any other speakers, so we have a motion to receive and file. Please vote.
That motion passes 13-0.
Thank you. Sorry, guys, give me just a second. Next we have Ordinance 2020-6, fiscal year 2021, August year-end funds budget appropriation ordinance. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve Ducey.
Okay, is there support?
Support, Romano. Support by Brown.
Okay, motion by Duge. I think it was supported by Romano. Steve, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, this is again one of our continuing appropriations ordinance that we pass 2 or 3 times a year relative to the funds that have something other than a December year end. In this particular case, it's the Head Start program. Their new year starts on September 1st. So we're allocating, I believe, 4 months of the current year budget as an appropriation to get their year end start or new year started until we get to the point of actually approving a fiscal 21 budget for them. We just did this last month for some junior, or no, we did it in June for June year ends. And we'll be back next month for the programs that have September year ends as well.
Okay, I don't see any speakers. We have a motion and support. Please vote.
The motion passes 13-0.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have correspondence. We have Treasurer's Office first and second quarter reports. We don't have anybody here that's going to speak to that, correct?
Move in their entirety, A and B.
Yes. Oh, Commissioner Kleinfeld. Christina Miller from the Treasurer's Office is on in case there are any questions.
Okay.
I support Leanne's motion.
Okay, they've been moved and supported. Does anybody have any questions for her? Okay, please vote.
The motion passes 13-0.
Thank you. All right, new business. Does anyone have anything under new business?
I have a comment or something or item, Commissioner.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a heads up for the board. You'll recall a few months ago, we talked about pursuing a refunding of our retiree healthcare bonds. The board approved contracts for professional services, and then COVID hit and the market fell off the cliff and we stopped that process. The market has sort of corrected itself. We're now being advised by our consultants that we should pursue the refunding once again. So that's in process. There's no fee increases. So those contracts that were approved by the board are still in effect. And we will be bringing a bond authorizing resolution to Finance Committee in September.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else under new business?
Commissioner
Hahn.
I hit the button, but that must not have worked. I just want
That might be my fault.
Yeah.
I know we were talking prior to the meeting started. I want to officially congratulate you on being the new continuing president of MAC And
Thank
that was a very lovely picture in the paper. So congrats.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Chair Smith. I had moved from details.
Thanks. You let Commissioner Hall one-up me here on this and get ahead of me on that. So again, congratulations on being reelected. That's a very proud moment for our board too. So just as good as it, great as it is for you, it's also nice for our board. So thank you for taking on that task, and congratulations for being elected. Also, next meeting will start at 3. It's not right after this meeting, so it will be at 3 o'clock, which is very close. All you have to do is click backwards on your Civic Clerk and then back to the original boxes, and then the next meeting will come up. You can get back in and you can stay right on this line from what I know. So just wanted to let everybody know you don't have to do anything with this connection, your phone connection, but on Civic Clerk, you have to go back and join the next meeting.
Okay,
So
thank
talk
you.
to you.
All right, anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll close new business. Public participation. Does anyone wish to be heard? Let me check chat. Anyone wish to be heard?
Madam Chair, you might want to remind them to push *6 to unmute themselves if they like to be heard.
Okay. Push *6 to unmute yourself if you'd like to be heard. Anyone wish to be heard? All right, seeing none, we'll close.
Motion to adjourn,
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, now I haven't called for that yet. I'm not going to call for it until you two calm down. We'll close public participation. Let me think about it for just a second here.
Is
All right.
DJ on the line?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
By Drolette.
Motion to adjourn.
Supported by DJ.
Supported by DJ. Please vote.
Everybody's getting remote meeting slap happy.
Yes. I'm just going to assume that that vote passes and we are adjourned.
See everybody in about 12 minutes.